But do you want me to send you the link, Robert, so you can send it out to your people or whatever, or like, because like, or it's up to you. It's totally up to you. Whatever. Or do you want to just go with it for now, and then we can promote it later? We are live on Rumble. Yeah. But yeah. Do you want to just go with it later, or
I'll
whatever
just do
you?
it later. Yeah.
Okay. All
I'm
right. Hey
afraid
guys.
I'm going to lose something here if I
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I agree with you. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. I'm really excited about my guest today. He's literally one of my favorite guests of like that I ever have on the show. He's Robert Bitto from Mexico Unexplained because I'm very interested in like the mysteries of Mexico and like their cryptids and all the interesting stuff that goes on there and Robert has been doing his YouTube channel Mexico Unexplained where he's been coming up with like amazing things like some of the cryptids that are in Mexico, some of the creatures, amazing stuff. All the UFO activity in Mexico, the folklore, the legends of Mexico. Like every time Robert, he's literally like one of my absolute favorite. I know I say this for a lot of people, but like when I say it for Robert, I really mean it because, and I mean he's literally one of my absolute favorite guests to have on the show. Like it's hands down. He always brings such a fun show and. He reminds me of like a typical Art Bell type guest because he just brings awesome information. And yeah, and I really I really think his channel's a treasure to the community. And with all that said, I'd like to give him a big warm welcome back to the show. Robert, thanks so much for coming back on, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again. And thanks for that very generous introduction you gave me there. I very much appreciate it. And shows with you are always fun. So I'm glad to be back too.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry we had technical difficulties. It seems like that's happening more and more on StreamYard. I might have to ditch StreamYard totally. But it's crazy. So yeah, it's but we're here now. But what I was gonna ask you, so what's new with Mexico Unexplained? What have you been what's been going on?
Well, I had to take a break for, oh, I don't know, like 6 weeks because I moved out of California. I left San Diego. I'm no longer in sunny San Diego. I traded Southern California for America's heartland. I moved from a city of what, 4 million people or whatever on the coast to central Nebraska. I know
Wow.
that sounds like a big change. I live in a city of 22,000 people now. And let me tell you, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. And just about an hour and a half ago, I unpacked my last box. So this 2 month ordeal is finally over. And now I'm settled in my new house and I'm in a new state, new culture, everything. But Mexico Unexplained is going on, and I have all of the things going that I had before, including the trips that I have planned for next year. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be offering tours of Mexico based on my books. And yeah, so I'm going forward. And you know how hard it is to eke out a living on YouTube. We try to build our audiences and all that stuff. But I decided that I'm going to keep plugging along, even though with my current calculations, I'm going to get to the 100,000 mark in 40 years.
Wow.
Everybody wants to get to that 100,000 mark on YouTube to get that plaque, that silver arrow or whatever. But 40 years from now, I'll have that, you know. So it's a labor of love, is what I'm saying. I keep on doing this stuff. It's a good hobby, and I love doing it. I love interviews like this, and I'm going to, like I said, next year do these tours to the places I talk about because you know I go down there all the time, and I used to have a small side tour business 20 years ago where I used to take people down to Mexico. So I'm going to revive that. But yeah, things are steady as she goes. And now I'm back in the swing of things now that I'm all settled here in the wonderful state of Nebraska.
And how do you like Nebraska so far?
I love it. It is a dream. It's a paradise. And you know what? When you, and people are like flipping out, they think that something happened to me or something, some mental break maybe. But oh gosh, nothing comes to mind. Let me ask you, what do you think about when you think about Nebraska? What comes to mind?
I think cornfields and probably a lot of hot women, I mean, because I mean, like usually Midwestern women are really pretty, so that's kind of what, and I think of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the football team,
Well,
I don't know too much about it.
that's all that people think about here. But see, you know what? That's about all what people, you take away the hot women. I think most people think about just cornfields and maybe the football team, and nothing else comes to mind. And that's a good thing because I kind of want it to stay the way that it is now. In this city, it's unbelievable what I've discovered here. It's a paradise. There's no homeless people, no graffiti, no trash. Everything is clean. Um, there are not even any stray shopping carts in the Walmart parking lot because people are so conscientious here. They look after each other, they take care of their own business. Even in the poor parts of town, the lawns are nice, people keep up their yards and everything. It's just such an orderly, nice, laid back place with all the modern conveniences. And what was really hard for this move for me is, as you know, the whole basis of Mexico Unexplained, how it started is I own a business. I import things from Mexico, South America, and Central America. And that was the beginning of the whole Mexico Unexplained thing because I would go down there, buy merchandise, and then hear stories, oh, UFO crash happened here, or there's a strange creature that lives in the cave or whatever. So, I have this business, but this business that I have is completely online. So I can pick it up and move it anywhere. And here, where I live in this gigantic house on this property, I have my business also. I have a warehouse on this property.
No
So I don't
way.
have to,
That's so
yeah,
cool.
I don't have to rent a warehouse. It's right here. I can, walk 50 feet and then from where I'm sitting, and there's all my stuff, all my merchandise. So everything is all together here. And it's such a better quality of life. The air is clean, the water is clean here, and the food, the beef, there's cattle ranches around. I can go to the local farmers market and buy a whole cow if I wanted to that hasn't been injected with anything. No, seriously, I could make a deal with a cattle rancher and buy a whole cow that is completely natural. I mean, the meat, the food here is everything is clean. This is like some secret little paradise. It's amazing. And the locals, it's funny because people say, San Diego, what brought you here? And the people here don't even know how good they have it. So um, now I'm just in a different place and it's much better. Let me tell you, I can just feel the stress coming. So many things happened to me in San Diego. My business was almost burned down in the George Floyd riots. A mob of people, Antifa and, all BLM were marching in my neighborhood where I lived. And if they had turned right instead of left, they would have come right to where my house. And then there were wildfires that happened 6 months ago, very close to my home. A homeless camp got on fire. All of these things happened to me. I was robbed. I witnessed all of these crimes happening in front of my face. Grocery store employees getting beat up and shoplifting and all of this stuff, and I mean, At one point I felt like I was living in a Samuel L. Jackson movie, you know. I break you, you mother, you
That's hilarious. No, I mean, but that's enough to make anyone want to drive away from you know, that makes it's enough to make anyone want to move away from where they grew up, you know. And I knew you grew up in the LA area, right? Or San Diego.
No, no, actually, I did not grow up in California. I lived in California for almost 20 years. But
I
I
mean,
grew
you're an East Coast guy, right?
Well,
You're
I was born in New York City and I always say this as a piece of trivia, in the same hospital as Donald Trump, which is true. And then when I was a little kid in the first grade, my we moved to New Mexico. So I grew up in New Mexico, and I consider New Mexico to be my home state because I spent most of my childhood there.
oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then when I got out of school, then that's when I got a job with a big multinational corporation. And 30 years ago, right now, I was in Mexico City in their corporate headquarters. And that's what started my business because I got sick of corporate America. They sent me from Mexico to South America to Brazil. And then after that, they sent me back to the States. And it was ruminating in my mind that I wanted to start an international business importing, arts and crafts. And then so in 1999, that's when I started my business. So it's almost 26 years ago that I started this business. And then Mexico Unexplained came after that because, like I said, just going down there and being in the countries, I've, heard firsthand from people legends and myths and things like that. And I've seen things myself. And yeah, there's a never ending amount of material. So anytime that you have me on as a guest, there's always new stuff to talk about because it's endless material. And a lot of the material is not in the English speaking world. It doesn't make it to the English speaking world. It's in the press down there, maybe a local story or a legend that doesn't even leave the community or the area. So
Yeah.
there's always stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and I can't even pronounce some of these creatures we're going to talk about tonight, but I'm really excited about it. So let's start off with I guess you wanted to talk about like some of the stuff that's featured in your book from Mexican Monsters, right?
Yeah, well, we can start there. We've talked a lot about some of the monsters before, like we talked about like the Llorona, the weeping woman, and that's the only one that I had a personal connection to as a little kid in New Mexico. I thought I saw her, and I've talked about that on your show before, where I was with a group of kids and we were crossing an arroyo, a dry stream bed, and we thought we saw this wailing, weeping woman who goes after kids. And, we all ran away and everything. And the ironic thing here with that story, and, like I said, I've talked about this before on your show, and people can call up that show for all of the details. Be easy in your archives or whatever. But the arroyo that we crossed, where that Llorona was in, it was called the Han Arroyo. And the street that I'm living on in Nebraska is called Han. Isn't that weird?
It's wow, it's like everything comes full circle, you
I
know?
don't know. I mean, that's bizarre. I mean,
Yeah.
I realized that, after I got the house, I was like, wait a minute, Han, that's the name of the arroyo, where I saw that weeping woman legend, the Llorona. But that legend we've talked about before. There are other similar legends. There are a lot of witch legends that exist in Mexico, and they have this kind of a similar theme. It's usually some marginalized woman who is wronged by society. She might be ugly. Um, People don't like her or whatever. And then she has to move to the edge of town and then she becomes a witch. She dabbles in the dark arts or whatever. But a lot of these stories, they have really ancient origins. Like I was thinking about one of the things we could talk about tonight is the shtabai. And, that almost sounds Jewish, shtabai, a shtick, But
Yeah.
Shtabai, like Yiddish, some Yiddish comedian, talking. But Shtabai, that's a witch in the Yucatan. And it could be based on the ancient Maya god of suicide, which she was represented with a noose around her neck. And that that was an Ish goddess. So the Ishbe, Ishchel, that Ish carried to Shtabai. And so this Shtabai is a witch that lives in the forest and preys on men who are drunk or who stray away from people, or stray away from their families. They cheat on their wives or whatever. And this witch appears and tries to lure the man, and then the man either disappears for good, or there's a missing time episode. So there's missing time connected with this witch, and people who are abducted by her, they don't know what happens for days. Like, there was one story that happened like 15 years ago about this worker who would go to a bus stop and wait for the bus to go from his town to the capital city of Merida in Yucatan. And he didn't come home one night. And they think that he had wandered from the bus stop into the jungle, maybe like to relieve himself or something, and then encountered the witch who took him away. And then he appeared at the bus stop 5 days later, dehydrated and, emaciated. And he had no idea where he was for that time. And
Wow.
yeah, and people think that he was abducted by a shtabai. Okay. And
Wow.
there's a similar story in the state of Oaxaca. And that one, you said that it was hard to pronounce, Matzalwicha. And that's another witch who appears and takes advantage of drunk men, or men who, spend the night out carousing or whatever. And these stories, some of them are told to try to scare younger guys into trying to live a straight and narrow life, because you could be abducted and killed by this feminine creature, you know. And it's the age old story of the temptress, that's going to lure you away if you're not if you don't have your head on straight, and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're going on this crooked path. And there's even in central Mexico, if you go, okay, because geographically we've gone from the Yucatan to Oaxaca, and then if you go to central Mexico, there's a similar feminine, seductive type of creature called the Tlanchana. And the Tlanchana is a mermaid type creature. And it combines the European notion of a mermaid with ancient Mexican beliefs. And how I first heard about the Tlanchana, here's a personal story. I was doing some arts and crafts shopping in the early part of my business. I guess it was like the year 2000. I went to a town in the state of Mexico. In the country of Mexico, there's Mexico City, and then east of Mexico City, there's a state. It's, the country's divided into states like the US is. There's a state called Mexico. It's a state also. In the state of Mexico, there's a town called Metepec, and that means hill of the agave. Me, that's the agave, and Tepec. Tepec at the end of a word in the Aztec language means hill, like Chapultepec Park in Mexico City, that's the hill of the grasshopper. But at Metepec, in this town, I was shopping for arts and crafts. They make trees of life, they make nativity sets and stuff. And I was looking, and I was, the nativity sets, they have the baby Jesus. Excuse me. Let me get a drink. They have the baby Jesus, Mary, the angels, the shepherds, and everything. And then there's a mermaid playing a guitar. And it seemed like every nativity set had that. And so I started asking people, what's this guitar playing mermaid doing in a nativity set? And why in the center of town, why is there a statue of a mermaid playing a guitar? And they said, well, that's not a mermaid, that's a Tlanchana. And so that's how I learned about it. So what's the Tlanchana? The Tlanchana is based on this old Aztec and pre-Aztec creature that lives in lakes and small rivers. It's not in the ocean. It's in the highlands, in the lakes and the rivers. And it's a half serpent and half woman. And it turned into like a mermaid creature after the Spanish came. And it's one of those creatures that lures men into the lake. And there have been modern sightings of these serpent like creatures in these lakes, these big serpents. And so some people believe that the Tlanchana myth is based on an actual cryptid, much like a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster, something, a legendary creature that hasn't been described yet by science. So a lot of these legends that have these stories wrapped around in them, they're some of them I believe are based on sightings of things in nature. And then the people try to explain, what these things are and try to make sense of them. And then they come up with a story to fit what they saw. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I know I'm kind of like rambling, but
No, it's okay. I got a good question for you. Why do you think like places like Mexico, for example, this is a really good comparison because we just talked about this, like about like for example, like you don't hear about a lot of magical, mystical folklore stuff coming out of Nebraska per se, or at least I never do, But you hear about all this stuff coming out of Mexico. Do you feel like the places that are like richer in history are more tied to magic, like older places might be more magical, might be more tied to folklore? And I mean, do you think there's something to that?
well, here, excuse me, here in Nebraska, what was going on 1,200 years ago? We don't know. There's no archaeological record, there's no writing, and there's really no continuous culture here. You know, you can't ask an elder of a local tribe what was happening 1,000 years ago. You're not going to get much. Okay. The Spanish, when they arrived in Mexico, they encountered living, breathing civilizations with thousands of years of history, and in some cases, written records that went back 1,000 years. So, with this continuous living history of, continuous complex civilization with lots of documentation, monuments, things that we can look at. We can look at murals and interpret murals that were painted in 400 AD. There's a lot of stuff that's been left behind and a lot of complex civilizations a few complex civilizations that were intact when Europeans arrived and chroniclers arrived, because the Spanish, when they arrived to conquer, they brought the clergy. The clergy were very learned men, the monks, the priests, and they were anthropologists. They wanted to learn about the peoples of the New World, so they documented things like crazy. That wasn't going on here in Nebraska. There was really nothing here. And that's not a knock against the Omaha people or who, the different peoples who were here in Nebraska. There just wasn't enough to be communicated across time. There's more to be communicated across time in Mexico. And so you have a legend like the Tlanchana, where you can trace it back to, we have the modern retellings of the myths. Then you have the conquistadors with, the clergy writing down these stories. And then you can trace some of this stuff into the archaeological record. Like if you hear a legend about a flying serpent you know, a feathered serpent, let's say. Okay, you hear that legend now. You can trace that legend in Mexico 3,000 years just with archaeology, you know, because they left behind a lot of physical stuff that we can look at. And so there's a lot that we know. And that's not to say that there wasn't a lot going on here where I'm sitting now, right here in Nebraska. We just don't know.
Yeah.
There's nothing left.
One of the creatures I wanted to ask you about was the Huay Chivo, the
Well,
goat
that's an
man
interesting,
shapeshifter.
yeah, that's a goat man. And that comes from two words. Chivo is goat. Um, and it's also a soccer team too. And then Y comes from Wawa. And I know in your part of the country that's like a gas station or convenience store or something like
Yeah, in
that, right?
Philly they have them. Yeah.
So, but it combines two words, Yucatec Maya, the Y part, and that's a supernatural creature, and then Chivo is a goat. And so there have been modern sightings of this creature. I mean, within the within the last 5 or 10 years. And it's the White Chivo is a combination of a goat and a man. And it's not like the top half is a goat and the bottom half's a man. It has goat horns. It has part of a face of a man, part of a face of a goat, the body of a goat, and then part of the torso can also be a man's part to, the chest.
Yeah.
And then the legs of a goat and the feet of a man. Okay, so it's like
Wow.
staggered the way that it's a goat man. And some people believe in the ancient Maya tradition, it's a shapeshifter creature, so a sorcerer that turns into this sort of thing. And in some cases, the sorcerer has to take his head off. He detaches his head as a human in order to change into this creature, and has to put his head someplace, so when he comes back, he can take his head back. But so there was a sighting of this creature, I believe, in 2015, as recently as that, where there was a road crew in the Yucatan, and they found this creature on the side of the road, and then nobody knows what happened to the body. The body was taken away. So yeah, this creature has been cited for a long time, and there's a story with it that there was a man who wanted to be close to a woman who was a goat herder. Okay, and so he made a pact with the devil, and the devil, he said to the devil, I want to be close to this goat herder woman. And then so the devil said, okay, you got it. I'll make you close to her. So I'm going to make it so that you never leave her side. And he was like, yeah, right on. Yeah. And then what the devil did is turned him into a goat instead of
Wow.
making the woman fall in love. And then that story is a cautionary tale too, because there's a long history in Mexico of people wanting to make pacts with the devil in order to get earthly riches, or things that they want on earth, even a woman, like in this case. And so it's a cautionary tale once again that don't mess with the devil, because you might not get the outcome that you exactly want, because in this case the guy got turned into a goat because he wasn't specific enough with the devil, and the devil wanted to mess around with him, because he just asked to be around the woman all 24/7. So the devil turned him into a goat because she was a goat herder. So,
That's hilarious. That would be horrible, right? I mean, I would
yeah,
like,
so imagine you're in Mexico, you're in this little village or whatever, and you're some teenage boy or whatever, and you go, God, life sucks. I wish I could get out of here. I wish I could do something. Maybe I should make a pact with the devil, because seriously, there were there was a time in Mexico in the late colonial time where, and I even did a show about this. and about pacts with the devil. There were a lot of people, thousands of people, and they were investigated by the Inquisition. There were thousands of people that made actual pacts with the devil, and you can see them in writing. And so, this story could have come out of, telling your kids, don't do it because the devil will mess around with you, not give you exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah. And what are you giving up for that? You think you're giving up your soul, you know?
yeah, well, there's that too. Yeah, in the in those, yeah, you give up your soul in those pacts with the devil. That's the bargain, you know. So
Yeah.
you give up your eternal soul for whatever in the meantime. And the whole thing, what was happening, it's kind of like, in the late 1700s in colonial Mexico, this whole pact with the devil thing, it kind of reminds me of the modern day manifestation movement. There are a lot of people who are online that say, just imagine that red bicycle and it'll come to you, and all of this stuff. And if you don't do it right, it's because you're not doing it right. If you don't get it, you're not manifesting correctly. And then, so there are some people out there, though, in the manifestation community that do get the lottery win or whatever. And then other people think, well, I can manifest that too. And then it doesn't work for them. And then, so in colonial Mexico, this is what I'm drawing the parallel with. Colonial Mexico, there were some people that actually did get riches after they made the pact with the devil. This blood sign on a sheepskin. They signed their name, and that's their pact with the devil. And then they got rich. And then so people were saying, hey, it must work. I'm going to do that too. And like I said, it kind of reminds me of the manifestation movement of today. People say, I manifested my lottery win of 20 million, $20 million. And then all these other people try the same thing and then they don't get it, right? But
Do you think this is a kind of like a deeper topic, but do you think like that like the archons or demons or whatever like make human life miserable here for some people so they're left with like nothing but to resort to do something like that?
Well, that's what some people believe. I don't know. I don't know how I could test that.
Yeah.
How could you figure that out? I don't know.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's because I mean, well, yeah, yeah, you agree. I agree. You're right. You're exactly right. Yeah, I'm just gauging by like what the opinions I hear from people about how they're like, it's not fair here. It's like, it's a lot of pain and suffering and stuff
Yeah.
like that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
I think that's just the nature of the world we're in. Whatever this is, you might call it some sort of prison, some sort of school, whatever it is. You ain't gonna get what you want all the time, even though you're promised it, you know. So I don't know. Manifestation works for some people just like pacts with the devil did, for some people in colonial Mexico, or some people still do it, I guess. But like I said, these stories of the making a pact with the devil and the devil messing with you and it going wrong. There are a lot of stories like that in Mexico. And
yeah,
it's supposed to scare kids, and say just keep on the straight and narrow.
yeah. What about the Tlanchana, the beautiful but deadly mermaid?
Yeah, that's what I talked about that briefly when I was talking about the witches and stuff, and how I went to that town that had the mermaids in the nativity sets.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So
Okay, so you kind of covered that and the Llorona at the same time, kind of.
yeah, I mixed a lot of that together. Yeah. I was
Okay.
talking about like the witches and how they're tempting people. And we talked about the shtabai in the Yucatan, and then the Matlasihua in the Oaxaca. And then the Tlanchana is kind of a twist on that. And that's the mermaid that tempts the men, in these lakes and stuff. And here's a funny aside about that. There was I was noticing online when I was initially researching the stuff for my book. Um, there was a triathlon that was taking place, and part of, the swim part of it was in this lake that Alhojuco, Lake Alhojuco, is probably the most famous lake for sightings of the Tlanchana. And the triathlon, the swim part was going through that lake. And some people were saying, I'm not going to swim in that lake because you go in that lake and the Tlanchana is going to get you, you know. And most of the triathletes like blew it off and said, whatever, this is just BS, this is a legend. And then nothing happened during that, there wasn't any paranormal stuff or whatever. And then some of the locals said, well, the Tlanchana was hiding, that's not how she operates, it's one-on-one, she'll try to manipulate you and everything. And so that's why, that was the reason why she didn't appear during that triathlon with all those young men in the water, because she goes after primarily young guys. So
Yeah.
some people were saying that's going to be like a feast for her because that's her lake, but no, she didn't appear. So
I got a really good question for you. Like, I know you did a video on the first satanic temple that had opened in Mexico, and it was kind of like a big ordeal because it's such a heavily Christian country, you know.
right,
But like, how far do you think witchcraft goes back in Mexico? Like, and like, I mean, like, can you trace it?
you can't really, I mean, because it, you first have to define what witchcraft is, because you can look at alternative religious views, those go back thousands of years,
Yeah.
so magical practices, yeah, thousands of years. So, yeah. And
Wow,
then,
that's
it's good that you mentioned that satanic temple because it opened with a lot of fanfare and everything. And you know what? As a researcher, I kind of dropped that topic. I should probably look at that again and pull up local newspapers and stuff like that, because I wonder now, it's been about 2 years. I wonder how they're faring now. Are they still open? Have they shut down? Some interesting questions. I'll have to look into that after we're done.
yeah. You don't. I wouldn't see that being accepted in such a Catholic country, you know.
But in that region, there has been a folk magic tradition that goes back, in modern times, back to slave times, because a lot of escaped slaves who were still practicing African religious healing practices went to that part of the country, and they um, joined up with indigenous groups and formed their own communities. And in this town called Catemaco, there's this long, long history of this mixing of African and indigenous beliefs that are outside of Christianity. So, yeah,
I got a
in
question
that,
for you. But would those African healing traditions be similar to like what we would see in New Orleans as voodoo?
yep, exactly. It's the same thing. In the coastal areas of Mexico, Veracruz, and a little bit inland where there were sugar plantations and things where they imported African slaves from West Africa, it's those same traditions that you see in New Orleans, in Cuba. You have Santeria, and then you have the same in Brazil, Candomblé and Macumba. It's the same things. When I was down there, I was in Brazil, as before I started my business. Like I said in the beginning, I was transferred there with this international company. Um, I saw there are shops down there that sell that cater to this Afro-Brazilian religion, and there's some pretty interesting things in there. But you'll see similarities between what they call candomblé and macumba in Brazil. You'll see similarities with the Caribbean Afro Christian sort of mix, and then what's also going on in Mexico, in that Catemaco region.
What are some kind of like common items you would find in there? It sounds so interesting.
Well, you have the statues of the saints, and in Santeria they're called orishas, you know.
Yeah,
But
I wanted to tell you I had Miss Aida on my show. She's like a witch, but she's also Catholic, and she was telling me that like she was telling me that the Orishas are actually the saints, and that they use the saints to cover up the Orishas, because they weren't allowed to practice their religion, right?
right, and it's the same in Brazil. And in these shops, I went into one with a guy who I was working with in Brazil, and his mother was really into it. And most Brazilians, they will tell you, because I when I was in the office there, I asked people, "Do you believe in macumba? Do you believe in candomblé?" And the consensus among people in this modern office, it was American Express. I never really mentioned the company name, but American Express, one of America's oldest companies, founded in the 1850s, in this big, shiny corporate office in this huge city in Brazil, modern, city. The people in the office, they said, I don't believe in it, but I won't mess with it. Now, what does that tell you? What does
Yeah,
that tell you? I
it
don't
has
believe in
power.
any of that. I don't believe in any of that crap, but I won't mess with it. Oh, well, what is that? You won't mess with it. If you don't believe in it, then it doesn't matter whether you mess with it or not. But people are cautious about it. But I went into one of those stores with a coworker whose mother was really into it. Like, he was telling me that one day he came home and their dog was sick. The dog had been sick, and he came home one time as a little boy, and the dog was laid out on a table surrounded by candles. And there was some lady there who was like, like in this position like this, muttering things and like twirling her head and everything. I mean, how traumatizing is that for like a 10-year-old to come in and say, oh, my little dog, cachorrinho, where's my little dog? And they're surrounded by candles with this lady. But
That sounded so. I mean, yeah, that's
so
you lived in Brazil, right? Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
lived in
So
Brazil.
yeah, when I was down there, and so we went into that store and I bought a couple of these, and I went back. Okay, I went back there again in, what year was it? 2004. 2004 was my last buying trip. I was going to go back in 2020, and I almost made it, but they pulled the rug out from under me with the whole COVID thing. I had tickets, hotel booked, and everything. I was going to be there in April of 2020 to buy more stuff because I was going to be selling that sort of stuff. And I was going to go down there in 2020 to look at manufacturers, because some of these saints were very interesting. Like there was a saint that I bought. It was a baby devil. It almost looked like a cartoon character, and he was doing a little samba, you know. And I asked, "What's this devil baby?" And then the guy told me. The guy I was with said, "Well, that's the devil's baby, and you treat the devil's baby right, then the devil will treat you, well." So you have the statue of the devil's baby, and I don't remember the name. It's like some long African name. You have the statue of the devil's baby. You put little offerings there, and then if you're nice to the devil's baby, then you'll have power, because then the devil will look at you and say, "You're treating my baby, well, so I'm going to give you good fortune."
You think
But
there's some truth to that?
I don't believe in it, but I won't mess with it. How's that? How's that
I'm gonna
response?
start using that all the time now. Like, and I just wanted to say before the show, I can't believe this is turning out to be a really great show because I'll just tell you, Robert, it's been like a heck of a day. Like I had
Really?
we had the connection issues, but before that, like I don't know if you can see this eye here. My eye here is all red. It's all infected or something. I don't know what's
What?
wrong with it. Like I need a witch in my audience to like do some energy work on me and clear my eye up because like it's unbearable. But I mean, hearing these stories are like really, they're really so interesting to me. Like, I love talking about this stuff. That's why I was always telling people I was always interested when like Anthony Bourdain would come on, like way back in like 2005, 2006, 2008, because he would, go to a different country and you'd hear about a different culture every week. But I'd love to do that with my show. I've talked about this before. I'd love to do it like where I mix like the paranormal or like go to ancient sites or something like that, or like and mix that in with like a travel show. I'd love to do something like that. It's like my
Well,
dream.
you can go on one of my tours and hey, we can do something maybe.
That would be cool. Yeah, we could do like a live podcast. Yeah, yeah, that would be cool. So you are gonna do the tour?
Yeah, definitely. What I want to do is do two tours next year, and I want one to be just a general tour, and then the other one to be more like on the religious side. And I think I want to do like the religious miracles and mysteries because that's going to be more popular. And I want to try to get a broader audience, you know, so more that will attract Catholic people and things like that. But I want to do a general tour where I'm going to hit a lot of paranormal, ancient sites and things connected with UFOs and ghosts and all of this stuff. And so
Yeah.
what I'm going to do in the next couple months, now that I'm settled here in my new home, I'm going to go down there and map out the tours because you actually have to like go down physically and make deals with transportation and hotels and get group deals and everything. I'm really good at that because finding a cheap hotel and a really good cheap restaurant, that's what I've been doing for 26 years when I've been on my own, buying trips and stuff.
Yeah.
So I've done the tours before 20 years ago when I had an actual retail store because mostly upper middle class women would say, "Oh, it'd be so nice to go on a buying trip with you." And I'm like, you have no idea. Because they have this idea in their head of a Pier 1 commercial or something that they're dressed in some safari outfit with a pith helmet on and a clipboard and directing, load this here, that's what they think a buying trip is. And it isn't. It's like rent a beat up truck to go up into the mountains and hope that the axle of the truck doesn't get caught in the sand because the roads are crap. And then, getting up to the town and, hoping that the people are going to want to do business with you and, or whatever. And then trying to get the heck out of there and finding a decent hotel and all of that stuff
That's cool. That's
and
cool that
then
you were able to do
getting
all
all
that.
the merchandise and then staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning putting hecho en Mexico, made in Mexico stickers on the damn stuff because they didn't do it when they were supposed to, and you need those stickers for customs and and everything. There's all of these things that go wrong. And a lot of times I've loaded trucks and stuff. I'm down there and in order to move it all along, it's not a vacation. And these women who said, "Oh, it'd be neat to go on a buying trip with you," they had no idea that I'm down there slugging around, doing loading trucks with pottery sometimes, to just get it moving. And but they did give me an idea, because a lot of people said it would be neat to go on a buying trip with you, but they also said it'd be neat to see where all of these arts and crafts are made. And then so I said, okay, I'm going to put out a tour and a small tour of 20 people. I put it out there to my customers. I had a newsletter for my store and like within 2 weeks, it was all full. And so I'm going to do that with Mexico Unexplained. Hopefully, these 26,000 people who are following me on YouTube, some of them, who have come to me and asked me to be their tour guide down there. I hope that some of them will actually put their money where their mouths are and
Well, I
decide
mean,
to do that.
that's why it might be good to include me. I mean, like, I would just want to come, but like, I can get my audience involved a lot. I've been thinking about, I wanted to go to New Orleans and have an event because, like, New Orleans is like the paranormal capital of the world. And I still might do that, but like, I think it'd be great. I already have my passport. Like, if my audience like would be interested, we could all meet up and come on one of your trips. That'd be great, and I know they're interested because a lot of them do want to travel. You know what I mean? Like I know like a couple of them that are in the chat right now want to travel. Like, and I know a lot of them have said like if you ever put something together, I'll come. Some of them are overseas. A lot of people are in Australia and in England, but a lot of people are in US and Canada and they can definitely make it.
Yeah.
Like, and I think some of the people from overseas can make it too.
Oh,
So
sure. Just as long as they can get there.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
my business is not just, I buy these arts and crafts and stuff like that. It's not just Mexico. I concentrate a lot on Mexico, but and then I have this Mexico Unexplained channel, but I could easily do a Peru Unexplained. I could easily do a Brazil Unexplained because wherever I go, there's always something. There's always some creature, some UFO crash, some paranormal thing. I decided to concentrate on Mexico because that's where I have most of my experience. But I could do a channel called Brazil Unexplained because there's so much stuff out there. There's, it almost seems like the North American, the United States stuff is beaten to death. How many times do you have to hear about Bigfoot and the dog man and, you know, what Mothman? There's something online, the 100 Days of Mothman. There's some of this stuff has been beaten to death, and there are thousands of stories of anomalies, of cryptids, thousands of things in Latin America that nobody knows about up here that have
Yeah.
never been discussed. And I told you at the beginning that there are a lot of topics for me to yet to cover for Mexico, but you can multiply that by 20 if you include other countries.
Yeah.
And the American researchers, like I said, they're beating dead horses with a lot of this stuff because, you know, how many times can you talk about the Nevada caves with the giants with red hair or whatever?
Yeah.
There's, what I'm talking about, right? Or
Yeah.
the
I would.
Patterson Gimlin film or Mothman. It's over and over and over again. And there's so much stuff out there that, if we knew what was going on in Bolivia and Ecuador and Brazil, maybe we could piece together a bigger picture and understand things better, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why, talking about the stuff that I do in Mexico, hopefully the information that I'm bringing forward, maybe a Mothman researcher can use some of the stuff or a Bigfoot researcher or something, to get a bigger perspective. But there are a lot of countries that haven't even been touched with the paranormal. What do you know about paranormal Bolivia or cryptids that are in Bolivia? Nothing.
I don't know anything about that. I
Nothing.
wanted to tell you I know a little bit about Brazil, but not even their cryptid culture. Like I know about Brazil from like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I just know
Yeah.
about the culture. I know about the women and the culture and like like I
Always the women. You son.
but I mean like I've always wanted to go to Brazil. Like I've
Oh,
heard
it's
about like
wonderful.
I've heard how good the acai is there and stuff like that
Yeah,
because like
everything is great. The food is really good there too. I
yeah.
talk about how fresh the food is here in Nebraska, the meat down in Brazil, like the beef and stuff like that. It's just the food is really good there. It's all fresh and everything. And
Did you
yes, the
ever have the
pizza.
acai?
Yeah,
It's like a big thing right there, right? It's
it
like
was
a
just starting in the mid 90s when I was down there. It was just starting, and not many people in America had known about it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a little berry that grows in the jungle. And when I
Yeah.
was down there, I went all over the place too. So I went to the Amazon. I fished for piranhas. I went alligator hunting one time.
Wow.
When I was young and dumb, I was like, what, 25, 26 years old. Yeah. So,
Wow. Wow, holy shit. That's crazy. One thing I'm going to ask you about, I was looking at your channel today and you covered a UFO event that happened in Mexico. It was like a UFO crash, like that happened in the 80s. Like, and I had never heard of that. Like, so that this is just this is a prime example of what you were talking about like, stuff that goes under the radar that happens in these other countries that like we need to know about because maybe it can give us a bigger picture of what's going on, not
right.
just in the cryptid, but now in the UFO field too.
Well, in a lot of different fields, like someone even from Tijuana, excuse me, I talked about how a Zeppelin appeared over Tijuana when I was living in San Diego and I had heard about it, and I investigated that. A Zeppelin appeared over in the skies of Tijuana for like 10 minutes, and it was a Zeppelin from like Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany, 1905 or whatever. And it just appeared and it blinked out, and thousands of people saw it. And then somebody contacted me and said that there were some Zeppelin experiments in California, like in the 1880s or something like that. And this could have been some time warp that happened. But see, it happened across the border. And if I didn't, or if other people didn't bring it to the attention of English speakers, that that wouldn't have been known to that California Zeppelin researcher, who was talking about the Zeppelins that supposedly were secretly being built in the 1880s in California for some secret project or whatever that had to do also with time travel. So, this guy contacted me for more information about the Zeppelin that appeared in Tijuana because there was no information on the American side of the border about that. And so, goes back to what you were saying and I was saying about a bigger picture about things. There could be a key to the whole Bigfoot mystery in Bolivia, in their rendition of Bigfoot, their if they have one. I don't even know, you
Yeah.
know. And the only way to know, I didn't know, I was a big Bigfoot fan ever since I was like 10 years old, you know, even
Yeah.
through pictures of Bigfoot. I was going through all this stuff that I was, my life, my archives or whatever when I was moving and, getting rid of things and stuff like that. I found a box from elementary school where I was drawing pictures of Bigfoot, you know.
Yeah.
So I was always fascinated with Bigfoot, but I was maybe what, 45 years old when I found out that Mexico not only had one Bigfoot creature, but two. I didn't even know about it, even with all of my experience in Mexico. It took me, almost doing business down there for 10 years before I heard stories about the two Bigfoot creatures that are there, you know?
Yeah.
So even for someone like me who has a lot of exposure to that country, I didn't even know about it until many, many years later.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. So I guess I'll get back to some of the creatures. This one's really sounds really interesting. So it's a to to Tlaw Poochi, a vampire witch of rural Mexico.
Oh, the Tlahuelpuchi.
Yeah, that sounds
It
awesome.
almost sounds Italian at the end, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Tlahuelpuchi.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
you want to hear something funny, Robert? Dude, I almost shit my pants when I heard this today. So I was listening to this comedian from where you used to live, California. His name's Joey Diaz. He's very very vulgar, but he's funny. And he was saying that like he was on Joe Rogan, and he was saying that like I think you'll laugh at this because you have Italian heritage and I have Italian heritage, right? Like and you've probably seen a lot of the mafia movies back in the day. They were talking about like John Gotti, how John Gotti was okay. I'll cut to the chase. Okay, they were talking about how the mobsters would gamble on anything, and they were talking about how the mobsters used to gamble on Scrabble with each other, and then when they would get pissed and they would call the Scrabble hotline. I guess there was a Scrabble hotline that you could call back in the day, and they would call and they would debate like Scrabble the rules because they would be like wanting to put down these words on Scrabble like in Italian or like or like slang Italian, like mafia slang Italian, like they would want to basically make their own rules, and they would literally call the they would call the Scrabble hotline. Like, have you ever heard anything like this? It's hilarious, isn't it?
No, that's funny, but I didn't even know there was a Scrabble hotline.
I guess back in the day there was. Back probably when board
Verify
games were like
words.
really, really big, Or
That's
not a hotline, but like a phone number, I guess you could call. I don't know.
that's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, sorry. Sorry, we were talking. you made. Sorry, I went off track there. I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. We were talking about, well, I did that because I said Tlahuelpuchi. Sounds like Italian, Pucci at the end. The Tlahuelpuchi, it's a witch that sucks the blood out of little kids. And I might have mentioned this on one of your previous shows, but I'll talk about it again because it's a very fascinating story. Sometime in the 50s, in Mexico's smallest state, there's a state in central Mexico called Tlaxcala. So it starts with a TL, just like Tlahuelpuchi. Tlaxcala, in in this little state, there was a young guy who was in the capital city, Tlaxcala City, and he was working in the records department. And he was in the department that reviewed the records of the causes of death certificates. And there were death certificates coming from the rural areas, and cause of death for these infants was listed as chupado por la bruja, meaning sucked by the witch. That was the cause of death. So then he took these death certificates to his supervisor and try to make a name for himself, Mr. Officious, the office boy who wants to make a career for himself in the government, right? So he goes to his boss and says, look at all of these death certificates. They're saying the cause of death isn't drowning or accident, it's sucked by a witch. What is this? And then so they sent investigators to the rural parts of the state, and they found out that there was a legend that explained crib death, and what they believed that there was this witch that would, once again, a maligned poor woman who was scorned by the town, and the whole story that we talked about before in so many of these legends. The weird girl, the ugly girl who is tormented, she lives on the edge of town, and now she's going to get back at everybody, like Carrie at the prom or whatever. And so it's that age old story, right? I'm going to get back at these people. So the Tlahuelpuchi is a woman. And then just like the Huay Chivo, remember, the Goatman takes off his head. In this case, she takes off her legs and then transforms herself into a creature, usually like a bird or whatever. But this Tlahuelpuchi will transform itself into a flea and fly in a keyhole or a crack in the window or whatever, and then reappear in the baby's room as an ugly witch, and then descend on the baby and suck the baby's blood.
Oh
And
my
so,
God.
yeah, and then so a, a, a the unfortunate parents who wake up to a baby who's passed away with no explanation, that's what they believe happens. And so that is what was listed on that death certificate. And so this is a good example of a legend that doesn't even make it to the capital city of the state, where the legend is, believed in by the people, because in this tiny state of Mexico, Tlaxcala, it's like the Rhode Island of Mexico. In these little villages, they believed in this blood-sucking witch, and the people in the capital city of this state had never even heard of it before. They didn't know what this legend was. So this is a good example of something that's so localized. Not only is it not making it to the English speaking world, it wasn't even making it to the capital city of the state that it was found in, you know? So how many other legends are like this are out there that never see the light of day? They never leave their region or whatever. And when I'm going to these rural areas and stuff, I'm getting exposed to these stories. Or like, I think I might have told you on another show, I was traveling in the back roads of one of the west central states, Michoacan, and I heard in one of the towns that there was a flying saucer crash that had a landing site in a guy's cornfield, and he was charging like 20 pesos. And see, that could be a scam, right? It could have been a faked landing site. And I was with the driver, because I hire people to drive me around in these villages and stuff when I go on these buying trips to buy things and stuff. I don't ever do my own driving because it's better to hire a truck, down there when you get there. So my driver, I said, let's go. I'll pay for your admission, whatever. I want to go and see. And he didn't want to go because he was afraid of the radiation. He was afraid that there'd be radiation from the landing site. And I'm like, come on, man. There was no other way for me to get there because I was, next to him in this truck. So I didn't get to go, but I did hear about it. And, there's a lot of little stories that I hear when I'm on the road in these back roads and stuff, weird connections. And so, yeah, that's how I built this whole channel and the books and all of that.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating because it's a really niche subject, and I think like that's why I said I remember when you were about to call it quits on it, and I was like, we
Oh
need
yeah.
this channel around because like it's like I said at the beginning, it reminds me of a very Art Bell-esque type topic, like because like I feel like if Art Bell was still alive, you would have been a great guest for his show.
Well, thank you very much. I've reached out to his successors and to deaf ears.
Yeah, yeah.
Not all the
I don't
coast to
get.
coast people, and they want nothing to, and I thought, okay, I got 3 books down. I have 400 and whatever shows. I've been doing this now for almost 10 years. In a few months, it'll be 10 years that I've been doing this. What more do I have to do? And so, when I, excuse me, when I was about to call it quits, I came back because I said, okay, it's a labor of love. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's going to be 40 years before I get 100,000 views or 100,000 subscribers. So why not just do it for the fun of it? You know?
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
basically what I'm doing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree. It's I thought I was on my way, and then they took down my channel. So like, it's like, I feel like I'm starting all over. But I mean, I'm trying to build on Rumble too because at least I feel like with Rumble they have free speech. Like, and I don't know, like I don't know.
Well, the thing is, we can't compare ourselves to Joe Rogan or any of these other shows because it's like making a pact with the devil or manifesting. You get these lucky people, and then they say, "Look, I did it. You can do it too." And that's not true. That's not the case
Yeah,
because you and I both work really hard at our craft. And, if this all you got to do is work hard stuff, if that were really true, both of us would have over 1 million subscribers right now. And
I
that's not
know.
the case. I
Yeah,
mean, look at how many shows you do. You're a tireless worker. I don't know anybody who works harder than you. And you know what? I know I'm not the only person who said that to you. And because it is true, you put in a lot of time and your heart and soul and all of this stuff. And then then you see some 16-year-old kid on TikTok who posts junk videos and has 2 million subscribers. They've been around for 6 months or whatever. And then they say, yeah, I'm a star on social media. You can do it too. Come on. Come on. You know?
I'm starting to have a theory on this, Robert. I think that there's a lot of gatekeepers.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's certain people that are picked either by like intelligence agencies or by the platforms themselves
Oh, yeah.
and they prop these people up and then they can put out whatever narrative they want. You know what I mean?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. Yes. And there are, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
it
it's
only makes
really
sense
obvious.
because here's why I made the conclusion and if this guy hears me talking about his show, oh well, because I don't care. So you know, I've been trying to build on Rumble lately, you know, and they accepted me in their creator program, and I was all excited about that. It's supposed to
Good for
help you
you.
grow your channel, but
Good.
like, so I was on Rumble the other night, and we were live. And I was looking, and I had like 50 people watching my stream. But then there was this guy, there was this stream like that was like similar to mine. It was called Inverted World, and the guy has a great show. I'm not knocking him at all, but he had like 11,000 people watching, and I was like looking at his show, and I was like, what's he doing different than me? I mean, he isn't using any fancy production. You know, the only thing he's doing, I can see that like you know that was different than me is he's taking call-ins, right? But like that wouldn't warrant having 11,000 people watch your show. Anybody can take call-in. I can figure out taking call-ins. I mean, I'm figuring it out now. So I'm like, well, what is he doing that is like so special? You know, unless he's got a ticket from Rumble or another or a platform that they want to promote this guy for some reason. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah, I agree that there are some, it's obvious some people are promoted, and for what reason we can only speculate because we're not in on it. So we don't know. But there's, and I've been accused of being a Fed even on your show. If you remember, someone thought I was a Fed and you banned them. I think it was um, probably last year, last summer, someone accused me of being a Fed. And I'm like, I people accuse me of that a lot. And I say, where's my paycheck? You know, fine, pay me. I'm a Fed, show me the money, but I'm not. I'm languishing just like most people on these platforms. But I shouldn't say languishing because that's not good language to use. Because I really am doing it as a labor of love at this point. Because I put so many hours into this, it's crazy. I figured I was making like $2 an hour or something like that. But I'm just going to keep going and see how it goes. And anybody who's going to tell me, oh, you're doing this wrong or that wrong, it's like, you know yeah, these gurus and stuff. And some people come at me, consultants and stuff like that, and they don't know anything more than I know. They
Yeah.
just want my money. And if anybody approaches you like that, I would suggest that you don't do anything with them because they're just going to take your money, I think.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I
You
agree.
just got
I've
to
had
keep
people.
doing what you're doing for the love of what you're doing. And there's a lot more. And I know we all need money in this world. And one of the reasons why I moved to Nebraska is the cost of living is less than half of where I was before. And money's important and stuff like that. But there's so many other things that we get out of this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it's bigger than the money.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. Yeah.
And I would never, and I hope you wouldn't. And I think deep down, I think I know in your heart you wouldn't sell out if the feds came to you and stuff. And I mean,
Oh, hell no. No, I
yeah,
wouldn't,
so,
you know?
you know, and they know that. I think they know that. I think they know that about me, and they know that about other people too. And that's why they're making it hard for us, or they're ignoring us.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I agree. I agree 100%. You know, it makes me think, yeah, it really does. Like, and that's the only reason why I can think of as to why people get attention, you know? Like, even if this guy I saw the other day was, even if he's better than me at interviewing people, which I don't think he is, but I haven't really watched too many of his interviews. I just saw him having some lady on or something. But like, so like, but would that warrant him having 11,000 more viewers than me?
No,
11,000?
and
11,000? Where I
and
had
then
50? You know,
and then
it's like, I mean,
and you were
these you know, like Rumble talks about free speech, and they're letting me on there now, so I'm on Rumble right now. But like, they should honestly, you know, I don't know what they're doing. You know, I don't know what they're doing. You know, like, you know, they shouldn't prop up certain people, and you know, I don't know, and you know, they want, if they want to have a good platform, they should make it, you know, good for everybody to like to prosper. You know, I mean, we'll see. Who knows? That maybe they aren't. You know, maybe this guy's just lucky. I don't know. You know, I,
well, yeah, it could be. See, there's that dimension too that we don't ever talk. There's luck plays a big role in it too, I think. Not only, I think there's a combination of the two, and then there's also either or. You can be the golden boy of the alphabet agencies, and then you can be lucky too, I think.
yeah.
So, and what you were saying about the guy having a call-in show or whatever, having a call-in show doesn't mean anything because I was on a public access show from this guy in Indiana. He had me on as a guest, and that was a call-in show. And this guy put in a lot of work, and then he just disappeared because he gave up and said, forget it. He had like a horse property and he was like breeding horses and stuff, but he had this show, The Cosmic Cowboy, and he interviewed all these paranormal researchers and stuff like that. And it was a top rated show, but he went nowhere on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he put in, he was like you, he put in a lot of work, all these interviewers, and he interviewed like some heavy hitting people too. And he didn't go anywhere. And I think after like 8 years, he said, forget this. I'll just concentrate on my horses.
Yeah.
So he just gave up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to give up. I really don't, you know?
Yeah, and after I came back, because I did this show that said why I'm leaving YouTube, and I showed all the stats and I showed how, you know, I'm doing everything right. I'm cross promoting, because people say, why don't you have merch? Well, I have merch. Well, why don't you write a book? I have three, you know, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And then I say, well, I've done that before. I'm doing it now. And then the conversation usually ends because I'm like an anomaly. I'm doing everything plus, in this formula that's supposed to guarantee you success on these platforms. I have my line of merch, I have my books, I have cross promoting on TikTok and Facebook and all of this other stuff. I use social media, all the platforms to promote myself. Okay,
Yeah.
where are my million subs? It's not so it's almost like a screw you. I'm saying screw you to YouTube or these platforms or whatever. I'm going to be here. You're not going to discourage me from leaving. I'm going to keep going. And if
Yeah.
I get 4 subscribers a day, 5 subscribers a day, that's what my average is. That's where I calculated 40 more years. If that's the way it is, screw it. If you want to make it hard for me, YouTube, I'm still going to be here because I'm going on 10 years.
Wow. Wow.
I'm
That's
not
a
going to
long
give up.
time.
It's fun. I keep doing it. And, I have 3 interviews booked within the next 4 weeks. And I love
Wow.
doing interviews and I like meeting people and stuff and talking to people. And so I'm going to keep going. And I keep saying in every single show, like beating a dead horse, there's never ending material. There's so much to talk about. So I'm here for good. But they want to make it hard for me. I don't care anymore.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I agree 100%. I was gonna say, do you want to go over maybe one more creature? Maybe
Yeah,
one that
whatever
you
you
think
want
would
to
be
do. I
good?
mean, I'm
Like,
just, I'm so happy that, like I said, an hour and a half before I started this show, I unpacked my last box So it feels like uh I don't have anything to do now after 2 months of this move, So yeah, let's keep talking if you want.
Yeah, I was trying to think, I'm trying to think of something that we didn't go over yet. Or,
Well, how about, okay, we haven't talked about the Kadejos, the dogs of good and evil. I don't know if you can see that in the list. There's there are black and white dogs. They're out of myth in Mexico, southern Mexico and Central America. They have these dogs called Kadejos that they believe in. There's a white dog and a black dog. And the white dog, I mean, it's archetypal, right? The white dog is the good dog that shows up to save you. If you're in a bad predicament, it just poof, shows up out of nowhere. It's a legend that started in Central America and Southern Mexico, specifically the state of Chiapas. And when the black dog appears, there are three different types of the black Kadejo. And the first one is really malevolent and it's mean, and you can fight it though. You can if it attacks you, you can fight back. Okay. So that's like a gigantic black dog. And the second type is the devil himself that turns into a black dog. And you can't do anything if that black dog that type of cadejo comes after you. That the only thing that can save you is the white dog, the white cadejo that will appear if that second type of black dog comes after you. And this myth goes way back into Central America and Mexico. So yeah. And then the third is a more spiritual type of dog. It's more of a spirit, and it will go after you if you are drunk, or you're doing something bad or whatever. You have to like deserve it, and you can ward that off with a cross or with religious stuff, or you can call on the white dog to come and kill that black dog for you. So,
wow.
and it's a myth that could be based on something, some large oversized canines that may be running around in the jungle, because some people have seen these gigantic dogs. And um like so many of these legends, it could be based on a real creature that has not yet been identified. And because there are a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of empty, raw spaces out there. And there's a lot of wilderness that's not occupied by people, that people don't go into. So within these spaces, you never know what could be there. So
Wow. That's
maybe there are gigantic dogs in this part of the world. We don't know.
would it be like a dogman creature, do you think, or
No, it's
like a
no,
spirit?
it's not like no, it's not like that at all. It's just a gigantic dog. It's like a dog that is almost the size of like a pony or a burro or something. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Imagine if that's coming after you. There's not
That would be
much you can
insane.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you hope for the white dog. And the usually the Kadejo is depicted in art as the white and the black dog in a dog fight, you know, and that's like yin and yang and all of that stuff, balance in life, supposedly, a symbol of that. There's even a brew in El Salvador, in San Salvador. There's a brewery called Kadejo that has the dog as their little mascot or in their logo.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what about Aztec and Mayan high strangeness? We haven't talked about that a lot. Did you ever get into any of that? Like, is there?
Well, some of these creatures that we've been talking about are part of those cultures. Like for the Shabai, that witch, that's part of the Maya culture. And then the Aztecs, they have their own beliefs and stuff like that. Yeah, so all of these cultures in Mexico, they have their own um myths and legends, and yeah, it's endless.
Wow. Yeah. I was looking for that list you gave me because I totally lost my notes. But let me see here. If I can.
That's okay. We always wing it anyway, I think, right? And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Let me see here. We talked about the Goatman, the evil mermaid, the blood-sucking witch. We've talked about the boogeyman before. What
Yeah.
about the elves? I don't think we've talked about the elves before.
Well,
That'd be
yeah,
interesting.
that's a very popular thing to talk about. Now, in the Maya area, so you going back to what you were saying about Aztec and Maya high strangeness, the little elf people in the Maya area, they're called Alush. And then in the Aztec area, they're called Chaneque. And the illusion, the Chaneque are little people who live in the forest or in wilderness areas, and you have to respect their territory. And the Maya train, now this, it's a train that's going through the Yucatan that's destroying all this jungle to connect the major Maya archaeological sites. The the president of Mexico, um, AMLO, the one before the current president, actually said he saw an Alush, one of the little people in the forest, and you can look up that, and there is a photograph of this creature that's in the trees. And he claimed to have seen an Alush and made it public. It was big news when it happened because he was touring this rail line it's going to be an amazing thing, actually, that's going to link all of these major sites, but it's disrupting areas. And when you disrupt the areas of these spirits, then there's hell to pay. And an example of this is when they were building a bridge by the airport in Cancun. The bridge kept falling down, and if you drive under that bridge today, you will see a little stone house. And the stone house was built to appease the Alush who lived in the area, because you're supposed to ask the permission of the Alush or the Chaneque, the Aztec version. You're supposed to ask their permission if you ever do anything in their territory, or else they'll mess around with you. And so the bridge kept collapsing, and then people were wondering, these engineers were saying our designs are fine, what's going on here? And then the Maya elders in the area were saying, because you're not respecting the Alush who lives in the area. And they're like, oh yeah, right. So then they came to a compromise. They built a little house for the Alush, and they left offerings there. They built the bridge, and it didn't fall down after that. And you can still see that little house under that. I think it's called the Tizoc something. There's a hyphen there. If you look up Tizoc Bridge, Cancun Airport, you'll see this little house that's under the bridge. I've seen it with my own eyes. And yeah, that was built to appease the Alush. And it's the Alush sometimes is, or the Chaneque is used as excuses, I think, for a lot of people. You're missing your keys. Oh, the Alush took it. The Chaneque took it. They're messing around with me. But, if you plant a cornfield or something, you're supposed to, it's the Alush or the Chaneque's territory. You're supposed to leave him like a bottle of liquor and some cigarettes or whatever for you to have a good crop, or your crop will be messed with by these creatures. So it's an interesting thing. And you know what? In the archaeological record, we see figurines going back to the Olmec times, 2,500 years ago, of little people, Alushas, Chaneques, whatever they called them back then. We don't even know what the Olmecs called themselves. But we see figurines dating back that far of these little people. So we know that belief has been there for millennia.
Wow, that's amazing. This is so interesting. So, yeah. Um, yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Robert. I really enjoyed this. We almost went. I think we almost went about 2 hours because we got off to a late start, but we still went. It's. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you wanted to leave the audience with before we finish up for tonight? And thank you. This was awesome. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to you, you know. We're fellow Goombas, right? No, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to beg for subscribers. I'm not going to beg for people to buy my book. It's all out there. Like I said, I've been doing this for so long. I really appreciate any sort of interaction I have with the audience, with the public, because I'm presenting this information. People call me Professor Bitto or Dr. Bitto in the comments section all the time, like I'm some professor, imparting this information. But I have the right to learn too. So, what I mean by that is if you have traveled in Mexico, if you're Mexican American and you family, legends, lore, whatever, I want to hear from you. I want to hear if you've gone to see grandma in Oaxaca and there is a cave nearby where a creature lives. And I
I
want to
love
know.
that.
And because I've gotten some really good material from listeners and viewers who will contact me and say, you know, exactly this scenario that I said. I, I visit my grandma every summer. When I was a little kid, I used to visit my grandma every summer. And in this town, there's a legend of this lady, or there was a UFO that landed in the 60s, or I hear stuff like that from people. So, keep that coming. To me, that's more valuable to receive information than a $2 Patreon subscription or a donation or something like that. I'd rather get the information from people, and let's all work to make this knowledge base bigger.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
if anybody wants to contact me, I'm out there. You can Google my name, Robert Bitto, or you can just go directly to MexicoUnexplained.com, Mexico Unexplained in Facebook or on YouTube, and just shoot me a message because I really like talking about this stuff. And if you know something, I'll investigate it, and we'll work together and we'll see what we have. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on again, and I'd say let's do it again sometime.
For sure, absolutely. You're like I said, you're one of my favorite guests to have on the show. Like honestly, and I'm sorry about the connection problems. Like I
No,
hate when that happens. Like I'm ready to ditch StreamYard, man. I'm so sick of like I pay them like $50 a month, and like it's crazy because it's like like you'd think if you're paying. I mean, I know $50 isn't like a whole lot of money, but I mean it's a
no,
good
it's
chunk for
a month. Yeah.
their technology should be more streamlined to where there's not these delays, because what I've noticed in a lot of my streams lately when I've used StreamYard is there's delays in the internet, and then there's like that like it's just it's a mess. So yeah, I mean, because this went perfect once we went on Zoom,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so
So let's do it again sometime.
yeah, for sure. And thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. And have a nice day.